Level up your LA Kings experience with Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access and rewards. Enjoy great seats to the game in Section 103 along with Yamava Club access and parking included with your purchase. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings shop item at the game. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn perks on each purchase from the only leading ticket company with a rewards program. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings. Did you know the LA Kings have their own culinary partner? It's Superfood, celebrating 10 years and over 1 million meals served. Since 2020, the Kings have trusted Superfood to fuel their players. Now through Simply Lunch, you can bring that same performance-driven food to your office. Because when people eat better, they work better. Visit mysuperfood.com. That's mysuperfd.com. Or call 213-973-6145. Qualified companies can enjoy a free lunch for up to 10 managers.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, welcome back to All the Kings Men. We are taking a look forward to the 2026 NHL Entry Draft and here to look at potential candidates for the LA Kings in the first round of the 2026 NHL Entry Draft from the CHL. We're talking to founder and namesake of Scouching.com, Will Scouch. How are you doing today, Will?
Jesse Cohen. It's been a while. I'm happy to be back. You know, it's good to be back, and it's good to see you.
Listen, we're just going to get this out of the way. I always feel kind of bad when I talk to people about the draft because I feel like you and I have talked about this in the past. I don't like the draft, and I wish the draft were done away with.
I agree.
But it does exist, and so since it is the primary way to onboard new players into the league, that's what we've got, and since that's what happens, I would prefer the Kings be good at it. We talked about this a bit before I hit the record button. Because the Kings have Hampton Slokinski, Carter George, Petteri Rimponen, and Eric Portillo already in the goalie pipeline. 3 of them are signed to contracts. Petteri Rimponen is not. I'm guessing that we don't have to worry about goaltenders. And because of Brandt Clark and Henry Brustevich, I'm guessing there are a lot of right shot defensemen available, but the Kings picked 17th. Now, there's a possibility they might move up, I think, but it's not. We don't know yet. So we're not going to focus on right shot defensemen. We're not going to focus on goaltenders, and we are going to focus on the CHL. So today, I'd like to start talking about, and apologies to this young man if I mispronounce his last name, Ethan Belchetz or Belchetz?
Belchetz.
Belchetz,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Ethan is an interesting player. He's missed a bit of he missed a chunk of time with an injury. I think he broke his collarbone or something. Mm-hmm. But Belchetz is a guy. I mean, he's a first overall pick in the OHL draft from a few years back. Obviously, you can Google him and see the size and the sort of just the physical development that's already happened for a guy like that. And, you know, scoring 30 plus goals this year is no joke. Windsor was a good team, and I think he was a big part of that. I think with Belchetz, I would say if he were there for the Kings at 17, you could do a lot worse. He could be gone by then, but in terms of his style of play, I think he's a guy that when I watched him this year, I wasn't really taken with him. But then when I watched everything that I had seen back later on in the year, I kind of went, okay, I kind of see a little more of what's going on here with regards to his ability to sort of control the puck, settle it for a big guy. Obviously, he's a pretty good shooter, but he mucks it up in front of the net too. I think the right coach could get in his ear and get him to play a little more physical than he already does. It's not like that's not there, but I think that, you know, it's always like, oh, he's just a second late. He's just a little bit behind those moments where you really want him to be that hard forechecking guy. So he's an interesting combination of abilities, and I think a good coach could take him a long way. I know he's going to Michigan State, and that's, I think, a great spot for a guy like him. You know, I don't think he's like the finesse playmaker guy that like a Porter Martone was last year at all. But in terms of his just ability, I think to complement some really good players in the middle of your lineup, I think he could do a really good job of that and be a bit of a menace in front of the net and do all those things that coaches love you to do.
So a couple things. First of all, I picked him because he's the highest ranked player on this list that I'm using the daily face-off rankings and sort of eliminating the players I talked about already. He's 6'5". You mentioned that he's scheduled to go to Michigan State, but if he's taken in the first round, what's the likelihood that he signs an entry-level contract and then is ineligible to go to Michigan State?
I mean, I think that is hard to say right now, but I get the feeling that I think even the NHL team that's drafting him goes, well, we would slide that contract anyway, but I just don't think it makes all that much of a difference. So in my books, I think they're just going, like, I would not even begin to think about him in the NHL next year anyway. And I would just go, you know what, like Michigan State, he'll play a ton there. I would imagine he'll play with some really, really good players. I think it's a really, really good stepping stone for a guy like Belchet's. And so I would say that maybe he's a one and done. I'd be very curious to see where he's at in a year from now after a good year in college. I feel like guys who are talked about in this range of the draft probably wouldn't commit to a college if they thought, well, after I get drafted, I'll sign a deal and then undo my commitment. Like, that doesn't seem like a thing I would advise my player to do if I'm an agent, but you never know. I get the feeling that if I'm drafting Belchet's, I'm kind of expecting a year or at least a year at college, and then you go from there.
This is why I like talking to people who pay more attention to this stuff than I do, because we talked to Jimmy Lombardi middle of the season. Jimmy Lombardi was a 4th round draft pick, I believe, had committed to Michigan as well. 4th round draft pick, but he signed an entry level contract in the middle of the season, nullifying his move to Michigan. And when we talked to him, we didn't get a chance to talk to Ken Holland about it. I would have liked to have had the chance. But when we talked to Jimmy Lombardi, the question was, okay, you're 19, whatever age he is, you were going to go off to college to play and get all of the benefits, whatever there would be in the NCAA. Why sign an entry level contract? And he said basically the whole point of trying to get drafted and trying to find the best path would be to work towards an entry level contract. And I already got it. So mission accomplished. Why, sort of shut down that path. I mean, there were other reasons, but I'm simplifying it. Do you think the change in the NCAA rules, do you think we'll see a change to the status quo of like most 1st and 2nd round picks getting entry level contracts?
I would think yes. I get the feel. I mean, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of an agent or something. Like, I get the feeling that in general, we're in the middle of a very, very drastic shift. And I don't think that's controversial. And I think it is very, very dramatic. And I think for a lot of young players that are of this kind of caliber, I get the feeling that if they don't realize it now, players, especially Canadian junior players up here, will realize pretty quickly like just how valuable time in college can be and just how good. Like, I watched a lot of the NCAA playoffs this year. It was unbelievable hockey. You could go to the AHL maybe, I guess, but if I had to choose between the Canadian Hockey League now and the NCAA after I get drafted, I'm going to college, right? Like Lombardi, he had already been drafted and went back to junior. And I guess in that case, it's a little different. Like mid-season, you get offered your contract. And I agree, right? If they're offering you the deal after you've been drafted, then go nuts. But I think if you're committing before the draft, I mean, it would be something maybe I would ask them about. It's like, well, are you expecting me to sort of pull you out of college before you even go? But in Belchet's case, like if you do that, you're either putting him in the NHL or back in the CHL most likely. And I don't think I'd want him back in the Canadian Hockey League. Like, I'd want him taking a step and challenging himself. And so I think Michigan State makes a lot of sense in that case, at least for a season. But maybe there are other cases that would be different. But we'll just have to see. It's a weird couple of years. It's a weird period for the landscape, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case, whenever there's a change like this, whether it was instituting the salary cap 20 years ago or, the different CBAs. Every time there's a new CBA, it takes a while for teams to figure out the loopholes. The CHL to NCAA swap, obviously there's pluses and minuses. One of the pluses Jimmy Lombardi was talking about is that, under an entry-level contract with the Kings, he'd have access to their weight training and their nutritionists and, professional organization helping you physically prepare for this career. Whereas in the NCAA, there's all sorts of limitations. The team can't pay for a flight, can't pay for a hotel. You have to worry about your eligibility, et cetera. But Ethan Belchet's interesting mainly just because he's 6'5", and the article I saw, I think, referred to him as a Tasmanian devil. So
he certainly could be. I think if you can get that out of him, I think he'd be pretty good at it. It's just kind of, for me, it's been a little more mixed than that. But yeah, I mean, he can certainly he can certainly do quite a bit out there. If he's got his feet moving, he could do quite a bit.
The other change that is sort of looming in the background of all of this is Ken Holland is now the general manager for the LA Kings. Last summer, he was also the general manager taking over for Rob Blake, but he handed off autonomy at some level to Mark Yannetti. This season, now that he's got 1 year under his belt, the organizational philosophy may have shifted, right? We saw Jim Hiller fired in the middle of the year. DJ Smith came in, and the Kings changed the way they played. And they changed the way they had played for the better part of 5 or 6 years. And, I'm sure you're well aware, going back, I don't know how long, the Kings have a very sort of like specific kingy type player. So does that even still hold? Like, are we still looking for the same kinds of players now? And we just don't know. We have to wait.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the joy of times like this. I mean,
Yes.
It's sometimes just when you think you figured out what a team tends to prefer, something shifts and
they
you go,
everybody.
Yeah. And then you're like, well, I guess we're restarting with something totally new.
I'm calling this the summer of I don't know for the Kings because
I love it.
There's so many things that I just like, I have no idea. You lose Andrei Kopitar, who's been around for 20 years. Yeah. We're a year into the Ken Holland experience, 5 years in a row getting swept, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, next on my list is Liam Ruck. He's a right winger from Medicine Hat of the WHL. What do we know about him?
Well, I actually just saw him this morning. I was doing a game of him earlier today. I'm lower on Ruck than a lot of people. I have him more as like a late second-ish round guy.
Oh wow, okay, that is very low.
I think with Ruck, I'll tell you this. Before Andrew Basha came back to Medicine Hat this year, he was around a point a game, just under a point a game. And then when you got Andrew Basha back from Calgary, they went up to, I believe, both twins went up to about 1.6 points a game. So their scoring rate increased by about 60% when they added an Andrew Basha to the team. And that guy is, I think, one of the most dynamic skating forwards in the WHL right now. He was just a bottom six AHLer, and that was not a good environment for him. So when I look at Liam Ruck, I see a very smart puck mover. He's a guy who sees the ice well. He places his passes well. He's an inside-driven playmaker. There's a lot going on there that I think as a complementary playmaker, he has some really good upside. I look at the Medicine Hat Tigers, and the game I watched today was one of the playoff games they played against PA before they got eliminated, and they were getting absolutely hammered. And when you watch that team play, I think that's a team that they allow their players to play very, I don't want to say individualistic, but they kind of let them play their style of play. And they kind of give them a lot of freedom, it seems, to chip and chase after their own pucks and just really sort of try to play all on their own. And, their defensemen are pinching up a lot in the offensive zone and just very aggressive sort of offensive skilled hockey, which can work. But Prince Albert shut them down pretty well. And I think with Ruck, I worry about the skating ability. I think his ability to generate speed, resist pressure. He's a guy where if you give him open ice and you let him think and let him see the game around him, you're probably gonna make a mistake. He's gonna make you pay with something really, really well placed and really well thought out. But I really have some concerns about him with regards to, like, I don't see him as a bottom six NHLer if things don't really, really work out. And while I really respect the mind for the game and you can develop around that, as a winger that isn't the most gifted skater around and really needed one of the best skaters in the league to just pop up halfway through the season to like give him a really big leg up on the rest of the competition consistently, I have questions about him, but there are definitely, he's on my list and he's a guy that I would draft, but it's just a matter of like, maybe he interviews really well. That could change my mind. Maybe he, my skating coaches are like, yes, we can work with this guy there. That's where my blind spot kind of is. But I just have been, every time I've seen him, it's like, well, there are just other guys where I'm kind of going, I think there's something more projectable with some other guys ahead of him for me.
How do you value the fact that, with Gavin McKenna on the team last year, 41 points, Gavin McKenna goes off to the NCAA and Liam and his brother then become the leading scorers on the team. And he goes from 41 points to 104. Does that matter at all to you?
Well, I mean, it definitely matters. I mean, it's a huge improvement, but again, like a lot of that improvement came once they added a guy with AHL experience and added a guy who I think is a Basha was playing center between both ruck twins, and his ability to move the puck and put those two guys in a position to play in the offensive zone. And I mean, that team, they would play like they were not shy about playing two undersized defensemen that play extremely confident, skilled offensive hockey on the ice together, right? Jonas Wu and Bryce Pickford were just constantly on the ice and just doing everything. Like, that team as a unit was very unique and very wired to produce offensively. And I get the feeling that when you're talking about looking at the NHL and the Canadian Hockey League and the differences between the two, I with the NCAA changes especially, I have become very skeptical of being as much of a one-to-one comparison with regards to guys who produce a lot in the CHL and projecting them to the NHL. Like, I have a lot of guys higher than Liam Ruck that played on other teams and didn't get as much of a role, but I see what they kind of bring to the table. And I think if I'm a coach, I could see this guy maybe being a bottom six guy. And I think that there's value to that aside from the raw production. Like, obviously 100 points is incredible. But like, Medicine Hat has spent years and years and years amassing a number of players that just have skill, even Americans, right? Schaefer Gordon Carroll is there. Noah Davidson is there. They have a number of guys that can really play, and it just kind of feeds on itself over time. And so, I mean, yeah, like I one of the stats that I do track is not point production, but the points per game relative to the team's goals per game. And his number is under 30%.
Wait, say that again. Points per game relative to the
points per game divided by the team's goals per game.
Okay.
So you basically
what percentage you weigh in on how many points your team score? Okay.
And Liam was under 30%. And for the record, like Carson Carroll's was above like 35. And Ryan Lynn was 37, and JP Hurlbert 36. So these guys didn't score as much, but they were on teams that also didn't score as much, and they were part of more of the team's offense. So it's a really tough nut to crack in my view. But when I watch a guy like Liam Ruck, I go, okay, I see where this is all coming from, but am I drafting him in the first round? I think that's a lot of risk, and you're hoping, I think, for a lot of development. And I think you might be looking at some really good players and looking them off a little bit. And I don't know, maybe I'm missing something there, but that's just how I felt about him going back to the beginning of the year.
So I'm going to jump a few spots ahead on my list just to get his twin brother out of the way, Marcus Ruck, since as long as we're talking about the Rucks.
Yeah, I mean, I have always been a lot more impressed with Liam. I mean, okay. I don't mean any disrespect to Marcus at all. I just think that they play really well together, but in terms of like seeing an NHL level player there, I see Liam, and I see a guy, just the way he sees the ice and the way he can place passes and the way that he times his game, and he has a great shot. You just don't see it a ton. Like, I think there's a little more to chew on with Liam, and if they're a package deal, I maybe they want to be a package deal, I don't know, then that's fine. I could see why, but I think at that point you're kind of drafting a story. Mm-hmm. And I've never really gotten behind the idea of drafting a story, especially in the condition that the Canadian Hockey League, in my opinion, is right now, where it is, I think, really tough to sift through right now and pick winners and losers, just by virtue of how many players have moved in and out of that league in one season. And this, I think the changes to the NCAA are seismic, and I think we're still kind of working through it, and it might take some time. I think this draft class will be very illustrative. And the Ruck twins, I think, are a really good example of how it could be really illustrative of how things have changed.
Just from a pure content creation standpoint, I got to say the story is appealing. Like, if
of course,
if you were to draft, twin brothers in the first or second round and they come into dev camp or training camp, like, it just makes your life that much easier. Not that that's why you should do it, but
that I get. Yeah, that I understand.
All right, so we're going to backtrack a few steps. We got through the Rucks. The next one is sort of an odd one because obviously not, well, I shouldn't say obviously, I don't actually know, but Adam Novotny from the Peterborough Petes.
I mean, Adam Novotny, coming into this interview, I thought if anybody is an intriguing idea for the Kings at 17, I think Novotny is a really interesting example. I was actually talking to someone earlier today and kind of threw it out there that if there's a player, like watching a lot of the playoffs this year, seeing the Buffalo Sabres, for example, doing their thing, even though they got eliminated, I look at a guy like Novotny, and it sounds crazy when you say it, but I think it's true. There's a bit of an Alex type of player there. I think that with Novotny, the first few games I saw of him this year in Peterborough, I was kind of thinking like, what? Because I watched him when he was 16 back in the Czech Republic, and I loved him. I thought he was one of the brighter guys to come out of that place in a while. Like Yuri Kulich might have been the one that I kind of felt similarly about, but Novotny has this skating ability and this intensity level that is just, he has that like je ne sais quoi. There's just something about his game and that forechecking ability. But then when he went to Peterborough, it was kind of like, almost like he was playing down to his opposition. He was kind of taking his foot off the gas pedal, playing more off puck and sort of volume shooting and really quiet. And then I think, I'm insinuating that he went to the World Juniors, played really well there, and his agent sort of maybe tapped him on the shoulder and said, like, teams are questioning you, man. Like, you better go back to Peterborough and take off like a rocket, because you could be a first round pick, but people aren't talking about you like one. And I think that's fair. And he went back to Peterborough, and the last 5 or 6 times I've seen him, he's been outstanding. Just really good forechecking ability, really, really good physicality. I would love to see him take better scoring chances, but he does get a lot of them in a game, on and off the puck. You know, there's a lot of sort of two-way energy there to him. He's got some skill. But he also doesn't overthink things a lot. Like, he's not hanging onto the puck along the boards and turning it over a whole lot. I think he's cut down on that a lot too, but he's more working below the goal line, causing those turnovers, throwing the puck out in front, protecting the puck really well. And I think he's developed quite well over the course of this season from where he was at the beginning of the year. I have really come to like Adam Novotny, even though he might not have the 100-point season like some of these other guys have had. I think that when you sort of watch him play, you can see how he could be an efficient, like, middle six NHL winger. If you need him to play more of a physical role, he's capable of that. I think he's got the skating to do it. He's pretty physically developed as well for a guy his size. Like, he's one of the guys where I maybe could see him being let's see what happens with him in the AHL type guy next year. Just with the tools that he's got, the physicality, how he plays. I think that would be a good test for him, and you see where it goes. But I've really liked Novotny, and I think for my kind of understanding and watching the Kings play and like seeing what they kind of like to play like and everything, I think he's an interesting sort of hybrid of a bunch of different playing styles that could all work really, really well together and just be a really efficient player if he's really dialed in.
Because you mentioned the World Juniors, I have to bring up Wojtek Cihas, because he was the MVP, also from Czechia, and I think he had 12 points, and has gone on to play for the Rockets in Kelowna. So Novotny has 0 goals, 3 assists in that tournament, in a tournament where one of his countrymen, granted a year older, wins the MVP. So what did you like so much about Novotny's play at the World Juniors?
Well, it's amazing what can happen when you see a player who you wish they moved their feet more, start to move their feet more. And it seems like Novotny, once he put on the Czech jersey, I saw him attacking the net a lot more, carrying the puck a lot more confidently, being a lot more active and engaged off the puck. It's a short tournament. Sometimes things can bounce your way, sometimes things don't. And I think Novotny there, it's not like he was outstanding, I don't think, but it definitely was, for me at least, like a breath of fresh air of like, okay, I remember this guy from a year ago. It's still there, and there's something cooking, and I feel like this might be a bit of a jolt that sometimes the World Junior can do that, right? Guys get a different surroundings, different teammates. They get out of their sort of zone, whatever they're in with their teams. And then they go back rejuvenated. And next thing you know, they're playing really well for the next few months. And so, yeah, I would agree that like the raw numbers maybe weren't there, but watching Novotny there, it was like, from the experience of watching him over the years, it's like, okay, that player is still there. There's something cooking there. There's something under the surface. And then watching him with Peterborough down the stretch, I thought he had looked like a completely new player and just especially physically, found a new gear that I wasn't really expecting. And I think that that's really, really valuable, especially if you want to be a guy that scores in the 2026 NHL.
All right. We go from a guy born and started playing in Czechia, but winding up in the CHL, to a guy where, based on his name, I assumed when I opened up his information, I thought, oh, this is a Russian kid who finds himself playing in the CHL. But no, in fact, he's from Florida. I'm talking about Nikita Klepov.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Nikita Klepov is, I think, one of the more intriguing stories of the year. I mean, he was in the USHL last year with Sioux City, and that's where I first sort of saw him. I had a couple of people I know there be like, "Yep, you got to look out for this guy. He's really exciting to watch." And so at the Lincoln tournament, I thought he played on the best line in that tournament with Jack Hextall and Blake Zielinski. And Klepov, I think Klepov is a very interesting player. I don't know if I have certainty that he is like an NHLer, but it could work. Like, he is a little small and plays a little small, but he's not cowardly. Like, he's a bit of a grinder. He's a bit of that, like, I don't really back down. He'll challenge you. He'll forecheck. He'll do all those things. And the hands are really quick, and his shot, I think, is really high end. There's a lot of things in his game that I think are very, very good. And Saginaw was not a great team this year, and he performed very well. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, he had points on about 43% of his team's goals, which is very, very good. There's not that many guys that broke 40% in the CHL this year that are draft eligibles. But with Klepov, I find a lot of his offense, he does need to be in a comfort zone. A lot of it is sort of in the, like, if he has a guy that can sort of transport the puck into the offensive zone for him, which I think he did have this year with Barabanov and Dima Zhilkin, who were mostly his line mates in my experience. Those two guys are really good puck transporters. Those guys are really good sort of open ice players. And Klepov is not bad there, but I think Klepov is at his best when you hand him the puck at the offensive blue line, let him play on the half wall a little bit, sort of help him let him get off the boards, try to get off the boards, make a play, or just grip it and rip it. And I think that a guy like Klepov can do that as well. So for me, it's like, it's a matter of priority, right? I could see him being a first round pick. I don't know about 17, but I could see him being a first round pick if you really want to bet on the skill, sort of the complementary offense. And maybe over the years you can get him a little more engaged in more areas, a little bit more impactful. I think his skating stride is very short and compact and very active, but like the speed generation isn't quite where I want it to be for an offensive player. But he does have this sort of like foundational like grit to him a little bit, where you're kind of like, all right, I feel like this guy will take things as far as he can, whether that's an NHL job or not. Like, you're probably never going to have to worry about Nikita Klepov, and that does carry some value for me. And like, if he's a guy that's the second player you pick and it's 25th overall or 30th or 35th, like, yeah, you can bet on that skill, that finishing ability, and see where it goes. And I think he could be very productive. But on the other hand, there are guys in this draft that I just think bring a little bit more in more important areas for me. But he's an interesting one, and he's had a huge season. There's no doubt about that at all.
See, this is the danger of being a black hole team, not finishing high enough in the standings to get a good playoff ranking and not finishing low enough to get a lottery pick. 17 overall is like, yeah, every player we talk about, I suspect, is going to be kind of interesting. Maybe sure. They make it, maybe they don't, but they'll have the expectation of being a mid first rounder. And so if they bust out, it's egg on your face in a huge way. And if they, and if they make it, it's like, well, okay, how good are, like, was Rasmus Kupari was taken 20th overall. He reaches the criteria of having played 200 games in the NHL. So like, if you're evaluating the team using the standards that the team uses, you go, okay, that's a hit. Mm-hmm. But if you're a Kings fan, you look at Rasmus Kupari and you go, oh, what a waste of a pick.
Like, right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think in general with the draft, people get very carried away with expectations of players. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of uncertainty in this, right? Like, I always liken this to like a financial analysis. You might be really smart. You might be the smartest guy in the room with the best math background imaginable, but it doesn't mean you're always going to be right. There's always stuff that can happen. There's always stuff that can get in the way. And there's some stuff you can predict and there's some stuff you can't. And so I think in the draft, like, especially once you get past the first 15 guys in a given year, you're kind of taking a swing with risk, or if you get anything, you've done pretty well. And sometimes guys will fall and, you get Lane Hudson at the end of the second round and everybody pats themselves on the back and it's great. But on the other hand, plenty of teams take swings on guys and it doesn't work. And sometimes they're bottom line guys, sometimes they're third line, fourth line guys. And that's fine, right? Like, you found a player there. And if they're I mean, maybe you turned Rasmus Kupari into what eventually became Kemper, right?
Well,
it was
one
it was
quarter of Kemper.
yeah, and then right,
Yeah.
and then it sort of snowballed from there. So
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a weird, like you said off the top, it's a weird exercise in general. But yeah, it's interesting.
Do you like the 200 game? That's what I was talking about when I said Rasmus Kupari reaches the criteria. Like, generally speaking, what I have heard is that 200 games in the NHL is what it takes to qualify as a solid pick, which is funny to me because that's 2.5 seasons more or less.
Right.
Like, it doesn't really strike me as that impressive. But
I don't know. I think that's a question that deserves like a very long discussion, right? Like,
yeah, well, that's for another day. Then.
yeah, it's for another day. I mean, in general, I don't really like having those kinds of benchmarks. I think
Right.
every team can be constructed differently. I think that there are always players out there that if you do your homework and you put them in the right position, like I think hockey is a sport of complementing players. Like it's not necessarily about, sometimes you get your Connor McDavids, right? Where it doesn't matter who they play with, they're going to do whatever. But I think a lot of hockey, like I think a big reason you see guys, let's say, come out of nowhere, and Keegan Kolesar, like where did he come from? He's in the Stanley Cup final playing for the Vegas Golden Knights, and
Right.
noticeable. Where did he come from? It's like, well, you look for a guy like that and you put him in a job that it kind of makes sense, and then next thing you know, you're winning playoff games, and it's just sort of about your scouting approach and how you understand what you've got in a player. Like I think that is what matters a lot. And so sometimes I think guys, like I look at like an Eric Brandstrom as a guy where I don't think teams ever really realized what they had with him and did not really utilize him that well. And he ends up in Switzerland. I think he's one of the best players not playing in the NHL right now. And is that a bust? I don't really know, because when you watch him play, I'd like him on my team, but you can only do so much, right?
Or you've got a Jacob Middleton drafted in the 7th round.
Sure.
Floats around for a decade before finally becoming an NHLer, and then
Exactly.
is a great NHLer. So who gets credit for identifying him? The team that
Right.
drafted him, the 4 teams that he was on, where you're like, well, they must have seen something and it just didn't pan. Anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right. Next guy on my list, is you mentioned him already once, JP Hurlburt.
Ah, yes. Hurlburt is interesting. I mean, I've been watching him. I do some writing for Puck Preps, which is more collegiate oriented, really more of the younger draft classes, or the younger classes, I should say. And I've been watching him for a couple of years. He was playing up a year when I first saw him. I think he was playing 16U hockey when he was 15. And I mean, there's definitely a ton of skill with Hurlburt. You can't really fault his, like, I would say his agility and skill combination is very strong. I think the guys he played with complemented him very, very well. And he's a guy that I saw a bunch this year. I've done a video report on him already. I still don't really know what I think of him. I think as a college guy, he will have no problem being very productive. And part of me just kind of wonders if he's one of those, I'm trying to think of anything, like a Jimmy Vesey type, one of these Bobby Trevino types where they have really great college careers and there's nothing really wrong with how they play, but like, is it enough to be that in the NHL? Like, and there's a big dividing line between even college hockey now and the NCAA. And with Hurlburt, I just don't have a level of certainty about him. I think the skill is very good. He's a guy that I think brings a lot of intriguing upside, but part of the issue, and I think in prior years he'd probably be higher on my list, but I think part of the issue is this year, there's a lot of players this year where I think you can easily identify a pretty decent NHL role that they I would think likely could reach. Even if it's a bottom 6 forward, but a good one, that to me has a little more value than like Herbert, maybe your second line winger and maybe on your power play, but this and this and this and this needs to come a ways. So it's a little tricky with him. I think he's part of a very large group of players that stretch right into the end of my first round that I would consider, especially like Klepov, like if you wanted to bet on skill. But I just wonder if he's skilled enough or if he drives enough offense. Like all of these guys, Klepov and Hurlburt and a few others who are very, very productive, like at 5-on-5, they don't actually drive as much offense as you might think. And so that makes me a little bit skittish, right? He was a bit of a volume shooter from no man's land a lot of the time in my games, but the fundamentals are there. And could it come a ways over the next few years if he goes to college? Sure, right? I just don't know. And he's an interesting one. I don't really, and it's been years, and I know for a fact the Puck Preps guys also agree. We still don't know what to think about him. We've been watching him for 4 years at this point.
Great.
It's weird. There's some good ones out there.
Instead of going down through the list, because now we're getting into the 20s on this ranking, I'm just going to give you an opportunity. Any names that I didn't mention that you think might particularly stand out for Kings fans?
I mean, I've got 2 right off the hop. I mean, I think it's 17. I would be very surprised if you didn't see Mathis Preston and Xavier Villeneuve available.
Mathis Preston was the next name on the list.
Mathis Preston, I think, is one of the most misunderstood players in the entire class.
Really?
I think he is. Well, I mean, he was playing on Spokane. They don't really have a whole lot of offensive firepower to surround him with, and I think they were asking him to do way too much on his own, and it just is not feasible, really. He's very young for this draft class as well. He has my birthday, actually, by a coincidence. He's very thank you. He's very young, and I think I think he has superstar speed and skill combination. Like the guy he always has reminded me of is William Nylander. I know it's crazy to maybe put that out there when he's a point a game WHLer, but I mean, with Vancouver, he played 10 games. He had points on 45% of their goals in those 10 games. Like, he was a scoring machine on a team that did not make the playoffs. And so when I look at him, for me, a lot of it comes down to what goes on between the ears for him. He can be a frustrating player to watch. He can be a guy that kind of takes the foot off the gas pedal, but 2 shifts later, you see him throw a huge hit down low, turn the puck, cause a turnover, put the puck out in front with a couple of beautiful passing opportunities, and next thing you know, you're on the scoreboard. Like, it's one of those, and I like to believe in a player like when they're up here. And we interviewed him actually for a video on our channel, and he definitely comes off as a guy who's very confident. He's very confident in himself. He likes to, he likes to talk a talk, and he can walk the walk. It's just, if he's not walking the walk, people will notice, and it's really frustrating. But I think he is just as much upside as anybody else. And it's a similar story for Villeneuve. Like, Villeneuve is a guy who...
Well, let me hold on before you get
go
into
ahead.
Villeneuve. So, talking about Preston real quick, you may not know the answer to this, but Preston was traded to the Vancouver Giants, which, unfortunate, because Vancouver, just a rough year for hockey in Vancouver this year. Every team in every league, if not DFL, pretty close to it. But Kings draft pick Will Sharp was also traded to the Vancouver Giants. Now, both of them didn't play a ton of time in Vancouver. When you're trying to sort out what player might go to what team, do you consider the fact that, like, I have no idea how much scouting or how much attention the Kings development coaches or scouting staff would pay to Vancouver once Will Sharp got traded there. But that might be an opportunity for them to see more of Mathis Preston if they weren't already looking for him.
100%. I would be surprised if that wasn't part of the equation. I've done interviews with NHL teams before where part of the job, like I've done a pro scouting interview, and part of the job is literally watch the guys that are prospects that are not only on your own team, but on it was a division of teams in the NHL, and all of their guys. So I would imagine that there are people on the Kings that are responsible for tracking Will Sharp over the year. And after playing in Vancouver, I'm assuming that those people would have seen Preston in those games as well, and sort of had at least something to add to the discussion about a guy like Preston. So I think that I would be surprised if that wasn't the case and there wasn't some level of intel on him going on there.
All right, sorry to interrupt. Go. And then the next name you said was Villeneuve?
Yeah, Xavier Villeneuve. So he had a really rough playoff. I think that's a big reason people have kind of jumped off the wagon at the last minute here. I think he was really underwhelming there. And part of me wonders if he was fighting off, because he spent a bunch of time injured. Part of me was wondering if he was still fighting something off. It just did not look like the same player. But I mean, from what I can gather, he just was not playing very well. But he's going to BU. Like, he's already committed to going to Boston University.
A lot of college commits out of the CHL this year.
They've had Lane Hudson come and go. They've had Cole Hudson come and go. Now they're adding Xavier Villeneuve, and I think he fits in that mold perfectly. Like, he is, I think, one of the most explosive and dynamic skating and skill combination defensemen that we've seen in a very long time.
Left shot. I just have to interject.
Right. Left shot. Yeah. He's a left-hand shot. He usually plays on the left side. I don't think I saw him play the right side once this year. So there is that. That's a factor too. But like, at 17th overall, I don't think that there will be a more talented player available except maybe Preston. Like, when they're playing at their best of best, I don't In terms of guys that can produce in the NHL, if I'm looking at the NHL and I see the guys that are offensive defensemen that produce a lot, you think Hughes, you think Makar, you think insert whoever you like, you know. And if anybody in the last couple of years reminds me of a player like that, it's Villeneuve. Like the skating and skill combination, the audacity that he has to try some of the stuff that he tries is remarkable. I mean, I thought at the under-18s last year, he looked incredible at that tournament. I thought he played incredibly well against the NTDP at the little series they did earlier in the year. Like whenever he gets outside of the QMJHL, which I know people question, he still looks stellar in my opinion. And I look at him and I think at 17, like he's in my top 10. I know I'm not the only one with that going on, but he is a player like Preston where he can be frustrating and he's got a really high upside potential, but he's got to walk that walk more. And like being quiet in the playoffs right before this NHL draft, after everything he's done to this point, is a bit of a stumble across the finish line. But to me, I think that just means that you may as well take the swing on him because he might just fall later than he should.
A real quick question about evaluating talent at this level. So I've watched more of the Memorial Cup this year than I have probably ever before. And mostly it was because game one was the Kitchener Rangers versus the Kelowna Rockets. And it was Jared Woolley and Wojtek Cichas. And I was like, all right, well, the Kings are out of it. And there's two relatively highly thought of Kings prospects playing against each other. So I'll tune in and watch. And I was struck, Will, by how much, I'm going to call it hero ball, for lack of a better word, I saw during the game. So many guys that I've heard so much about, and I watched and I was like, I don't think they're playing with their teammates. I just got the impression that a lot of guys were out there trying to be Connor McDavid, trying to do it all by themselves. And I've said repeatedly, one of my gripes with Connor McDavid's game is that, yeah, he can beat four guys by himself in coverage in the offensive zone 1-on-4 and go through and score, but nobody else can. So evaluating a player based on their ability to mimic, you know, a unicorn of unicorns, if you're scouting these players, do you run the risk of seeing a guy who, for whatever reason, whether it's just he hit the growth spurt before everybody else, or he comes from a league or a neighborhood where nobody else is as talented as him, if you see these kids who have that kind of, you can call it confidence, but you can also call it arrogance.
I think a number of things are going on, and I think ruffled some feathers over the course of this season with with my beliefs about the state of the Canadian Hockey League right now. Mm-hmm. Like, and I kind of have alluded to it throughout this whole interview where a number of these guys that have a bunch of points, I'm kind of going, I don't know, maybe second round picks, late second round kind of thing. And I mean, Preston and Villeneuve, and like, I think Chase Reed's a great player. I think Devontae's a great player. They do exist, right? They are out there, but I've spent a lot of time this year watching all kinds of hockey leagues. I've spent a lot of time going from an OHL game to a USHL game to a Swedish Hockey League game and bouncing all around the world. We're back to back to back. And I got to tell you, like watching the Canadian Hockey League this year, I don't think it is a very competitive environment now. Mm. And I think that feeds into what you're talking about. I think it gives players a lot of leeway to do that type of thing because everybody is kind of like the level of quality in those leagues is just not awesome, right? Like there are 63 teams across Canada playing junior hockey right now. The vast majority of a big majority of the playoff series this year were 5 games or less. I know Everett won the WHL championship in a 5-game series. They won the last one 7-2. Like it's I don't think it's the best competitive environment. So it doesn't surprise me to hear someone from the States watching the Memorial Cup and going, there's some weird stuff going on here. Like this doesn't look quite right. And you're not alone in that. I personally believe that, like I said earlier, I think the decision for the NCAA to allow CHL players to come is the best decision they've ever made. Like, I think it's a brilliant idea. They should have done this a long time ago, not only for the players' sake, but for their own sake. I think the NCAA is better than ever. But I think back and I go, well, think about all the guys that have gone to college already. Imagine they went back to junior, right? What would Gavin McKenna look like in that league? What would Porter Martone look like in the OHL this year? All these guys could have kept playing. And I just look at that and I go, I would really, really think it's a disservice to those players. So now I'm watching the CHL this year And I'm watching some of these guys are leading the league in scoring and all that stuff. And I'm going, I don't really understand how that's happening.
Yeah.
But, you look at the goaltending quality in the CHL. I think maybe they're like there might be two Canadian goaltenders that I think I'd really want: Carter George and Joshua Ravensbergen. Jack Ivankovic went to college and he's been great, but there just isn't that much depth to it, I don't think, anymore. And that can really mix some things up. And a lot of I was watching a Saginaw game, the last game I did of Nikita Klepov. It was, I think, the game that they got eliminated in the first round. The shots were like 26-4 after 2 periods. Like, I don't see how that's a competitive environment or good for a player's development. So it doesn't surprise me to see a more neutral person coming in and going, yeah, there's something funky going on here.
I mean, part of it just could be the fact. So, like, the Kings get eliminated in the playoffs. They lose to Colorado in a series where I think, at least in Kingstown, a lot of people were like, well, they did better than we thought. They held Colorado to a couple goals and got swept. Yes. So then I watched the Ontario Reign playoffs where they lost in 5 games, and I was stunned at the drop-off. I mean, like, I enjoyed the games. I thought Ontario, it was a 5-game series, and it went 5 games. But, like, the offense for Ontario was disjointed and chaotic, and passes weren't connecting. And then I watched the Memorial Cup, and I was like, oh, my. It was another huge step down. And I watched a little bit of the Denver championship in the NCAA, and I got to say, like, yeah, I thought, I mean, now granted, it's the national championship at the NCAA level versus a first round out in the AHL, and then the host city, in the Memorial Cup, which doesn't mean anything; it just means they're the host city. So there was obviously gradations, but yeah, I was just like, I guess maybe this is just because I'm spoiled having watched the Lombardi era Kings, but like I look for teams that play responsibly defensively, and then in the offensive zone use their teammates.
Yes,
I was watching the Kitchener Rangers, and this is just one example, but like there was a pass. I'm blanking on the young man's name, but he's the center for Kitchener, the number 1 center. He found Jared Woolley crashing the net and had fed him a pass from behind the net, but it was like an actual play. It wasn't just okay, well we're going to try and do it, like I said, Euroball.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird thing. All right, before we wrap up, any other names? Because I sort of hogged the conversation.
No, it's all right. I mean,
Pridham.
I think. Oh, Jack Pridham. Okay, yeah. I mean, I think you're dead on. I mean, I think that I think the NCAA is the place to be. I think people are penalizing the guys that went to the CHL or left junior hockey to play the NCAA at 17 years old. Tynan Lawrence